Hey, what's going on? Welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Kyle Madson. I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. Joining me now, Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee, and we're going to talk about. I don't want to talk about Brock Purdy's MVP case. I want to talk about just kind of a big picture discourse. But before we do that, we also chat with Aaron Schatz of the FTN Network. Really, really smart analytics guru, and he had some interesting things to say.
He created DVOA.
Okay, there, that's easy. Really smart guy. And hearing him compare this 49ers team to some past 49ers teams and some historically great teams is really interesting, and we also get his MVP take. But before we do all that, let's tell you about our friends over at Lamb Chops, sglambchops.com. Check out the fall and winter collection. There's a hoodie, there's sweats, there's a new t-shirt out. There's a Letterman style jacket that is super sick. It's like a murdered out, like leather sleeves with the wool body. It is really, really cool and high quality, comfortable, looks dope. I don't know what other boxes you need to check, Chris.
It's the most important thing. It's looking dope.
Yep.
But I have my sweat shorts on right now. They got the zippered pockets. They got the drawstrings. Great for around the house. Great for going out. Maybe not when it's cold out, but you know what? They also have joggers that are great for when it's cold out. So shout out to Lamb Chops. They got gear for every scenario.
It's my go-to, the ash gray hoodie in the mornings. It's cold as hell when I wake up. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. It is so damn cold. I throw that thing on while I'm getting ready. I wear it while I drive to work. And it's my favorite article of clothing right now. You can get yours today at sglambchops.com. Promo code Candlestick20 to get 20% off your order. Join the herd today. We're also sponsored by Cooper's Brewing. Shout out to my neighbor or somebody who's friends with one of my neighbors or dating one of my neighbors. I don't know exactly what he's doing in the neighborhood, but shout out to him, guy in the Deion Sanders jersey who I gave some Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA to. He has not, I haven't seen him since, but I'm sure he loved the beer, as you will too, and you can get some at coopersbrewing.com.
I don't know what he does in the neighborhood.
Dude, just he's Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA and vibes.
Maybe he's loitering.
About him. just a transient, just hanging about the neighborhood.
But his beer game is
getting into doing various skullduggery.
His beer game is about as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah. Because anytime you have cooperage, that's what your beer game is.
Yeah. Cooperage, we know how good the beer is. We know how good the beer in Santa Rosa is, and I would put it up against anything. I say that over and over again. I can't reiterate it enough. IPAs, hazy pale ales, seltzers. If you like wheat beer, if you like oatmeal stouts, they got everything. It's all good there. The vibes are great. The food is good in the food trucks. So if you can get to the brewery in Santa Rosa, go. If you can order beer anywhere within the state of California, obviously do that. It must be 21, of course, but getting it delivered right to your door is chef's kiss. It's really good.
The very best. It's the Tommy DeVito of beer delivery. No, we're not doing that. Hey, Tommy DeVito punched the Niners playoff ticket. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
The Niners clinched the playoff spot, by the way, since we last talked. FYI.
Shocker.
All right. News. Shout out Candlestick Chronicles. Shout out this. Shout out to Cooper's Brewing and shout out to SG Lamb Chops. Let's dive in and then chat with Aaron Schatz. I want to talk about the Brock Purdy MVP discourse because obviously there's like two sides of it, right? You've got somebody like my buddy Doug Farrar at Touchdown Wire, who's like, this is an MVP candidate right now. And then you have Las Vegas Sportsbooks who have Brock Purdy as a top 2 MVP candidate. And then you have the other side where you have your Steven Ruizes of the world who's like, this guy's ass. And that seems to be kind of the two extremes of this debate. I thought Ben Solak, also from The Ringer, had a pretty down the middle take on the whole thing that I didn't hate. And I saw some responses to this that were like, wow, you hate Brock Purdy, you're so biased, da-da-da-da. And more or less, Solak put out a video that breaks down the film of Brock Purdy, what he likes and what he doesn't like. And the takeaway for him was, and this is quoting from his Twitter, at Benjamin Solak on Twitter. I think Brock Purdy is good. He's accurate and makes good decisions and can move. I also don't think Brock Purdy should win MVP because I think other quarterbacks are better and have to do more with less. So I don't like fine. Like that's I don't I don't necessarily like hate the take. And
Yeah,
I don't think he hates Brock Purdy or anything, and I don't think he said anything egregious.
like if you don't, for me, if you don't think Brock Purdy's the MVP of the league, I think that's fine. I think acknowledging that he's playing well and he's at least positioned himself to be in the conversation
Yeah.
is probably the right take, right? Like
Mhm.
all the numbers to this point are overwhelming, right? Like Nick Wagner, our buddy, tweeted out the EPA per dropback and the yards per attempt on throws at every level of the field, and Brock Purdy is either first or second. I think he's first in all of them until you get to 20, and then he's second. So there's no
Jesus.
level of the field to where like you can say Brock Purdy is not good. Now is part of that the scheme that he's in? Sure. Is part of that the players that are surrounding him? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But I don't think we can use any of that against him. And we keep saying it over and over again. Like Peyton Manning had an elite supporting cast when he had Andrew James and Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne.
Mhm.
Um, he had a insane supporting cast when he was with the Denver Broncos, right?
Mhm.
Um, Tom Brady had Randy Moss, Joe Montana had Jerry Rice, Steve Young had Jerry Rice, and Bill Walsh was obviously pulling the strings. So I just can't participate in the part of the conversation where, he like people that there's a segment of people who believe that he's like the 20th best quarterback in the league and he's just being carried by the supporting cast and Kyle Shanahan and all of that. I think we just have to acknowledge that two things can be true. He's playing at a high level and he's in a great system. That's the only way
Mhm.
you get to the production that the 49ers have offensively. They have the best offense in the league per Aaron shots, the DVO, like with DVOA, right? Like
Mhm.
all the counting stats, the eye test, everything says the 49ers have the best offense in the league. And yeah, the skill players are obviously a part of that, but Jimmy Garoppolo had the same set of skill players, and the 49ers offense didn't look anything like it looks right now, at least from an explosive play standpoint, right? Like the
Mhm.
49ers offense was very limited when Jimmy Garoppolo was a quarterback, and
Mhm.
now with Brock Purdy, it feels almost limitless, right? Like you can push the ball downfield, you
Mhm.
can make plays outside of structure. So I think to me, the MVP conversation, I think I said it last week or a couple weeks ago, that it's more emblematic of there not being a really awesome candidate, the fact that
Mhm.
Brock Purdy's in it, but to dismiss him entirely and not acknowledge that he is playing at a high level, I think is frankly just wrong. So if I don't have any problem with anybody who doesn't believe Brock Purdy's not the MVP, right?
Yeah,
Like I
I agree.
I personally think he's having a better season than Dak Prescott.
Mhm.
I think maybe Dak Prescott has a higher degree of difficulty, but it's not like Dak Prescott has a terrible group of supporting of weapons that he's throwing to either, or he's playing
Right.
opposite of bad defense either, right?
Right.
Like so, and we saw when Brock Purdy's outplayed Dak Prescott when they've been on the same field twice, including in the playoffs.
I my
Not that
only
last
my only
year's
gripe
playoff
my
game.
only my only gripe with that is that the 49ers just top to bottom have just been better than Dallas.
Yeah, but Dallas,
I don't
and again, like the last year,
the quarterbacks don't play against each other is the thing.
no, I know, and obviously last year's playoff game doesn't factor into the MVP discussion. But I
Mhm.
think there's this thought that like, oh, there's no way that Brock Purdy can be as good as Dak Prescott. It's like, and that's separate from the MVP conversation.
Mhm.
I just like how explain to me exactly how Dak Prescott is so much better than Brock Purdy when we've seen based on the evidence that we have. It's like we need Brock Purdy like to play with a terrible team and uh to to like fall behind by 40 points and come back and lead his team to victory before we can really be like
Di-
convinced. And yeah, like he doesn't
Dynamite analysis here.
he's not. Look, the reason why Patrick Mahomes has so much equity in all these conversations is because he does have all the fourth quarter comebacks, right? Including in Super Bowls. Right? Like
Yeah.
he has that equity to be like, all right, I can drag like a team that's struggling or a team that's down, and we haven't necessarily seen that from Brock Purdy yet. But the point here is when it comes to the MVP conversation, who around the league is that guy right now?
Mm.
And if there isn't really that guy, then like what is Brock Purdy not do? Like what is Brock Purdy not doing that he needs to do for him to get more consideration?
Yeah, it's just he's too short and doesn't have a big enough arm. Ergo, he'll never be the MVP of the league.
But right, like my point would be that's a scouting conversation, that's a team building conversation, that's not the MVP conversation.
Yeah, if you want to say I'm not sure I would pay Brock Purdy in 2 years $50 million a year, okay, like let's talk about that. Like let's have a very real conversation about that. But I think it comes down to, honestly, this is okay. So let's just say let's say it's Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy. Tyreek Hill doesn't get to 2,200 yards or whatever the heck number, and let's just say that both teams win out. Niners are the 1 seed, Cowboys the 2 seed. They have the same record, and they have just they continue the trajectory they're on. I honestly think it's going to come down to which voters look solely at counting stats and which ones dig into like downfield passing numbers and that's yards created, after contact and throws behind the line of scrimmage and all those kind of stats. If that's what they're going to look at, then fine. I don't, but if it comes down to just counting stats and people look and they go, wow, Brock Purdy finished second in the league in passing yards and he had 35 touchdowns and he had 10 interceptions and he averaged 9.8 yards per attempt, then he's going to be the MVP. I don't know how many people, and maybe it's a lot, but I don't know how many voters are going to look and go, Justin Herbert would get my vote before Brock Purdy because he has to do more with less. Okay.
Louis Riddick went on the Dan Patrick show today, and if you haven't seen that clip, he was basically talking about what Cam Newton said. And I don't know if you want to talk about what Cam Newton said, calling Brock Purdy a game manager, and even Dak Prescott a game manager. Like,
okay, Cam.
I don't agree with that idea.
I don't want to.
But
Cam Newton was awesome. Okay, I don't. Oh. I'm a Cam Newton truther in that if Cam Newton was born 8 years later, he would be the king of the goddamn NFL right now. Like, he came into the league before coaches really knew how to harness a talent like his and maximize it. And he was still really good. Like, don't get it twisted. I don't know how much ball Cam Newton knows. Like, that's a joke. But I don't know how much 49ers football is he watching on Sundays. Cowboys is he watching?
I also think if somebody called Cam Newton and offered him a job, he would take it, which is to say, like, there's some element of Cam Newton might be marketing himself against other NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he still might want to play. But Louis Riddick made the point that basically, like, we've been making, like, we need quarterbacks to throw across their body into quadruple coverage into the smallest window to be convinced that they're a good quarterback. Whereas like if a guy's making the right decisions and throwing to open receivers, that's somehow less valuable. Right? Like, obviously this isn't a talent conversation. If you want to have a conversation about the most talented quarterbacks, and yeah, Brock Purdy's not that guy. But the MVP is a narrative award, is it not? Like, it is an award.
100%.
It is an award that just we look back in history and it sort of tells a story about the season, right? Like in 2016, nobody was taking Matt Ryan over Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, right? Like no one looked at Matt Ryan as a better quarterback, but he just had a better year. And all the numbers are saying Brock Purdy's having a better year than everybody else. And the Niners are winning. And even the numbers that we talked to Aaron Schatz, he says this is the best 49ers team in history from a number standpoint, from a DVOA standpoint. Brock Purdy is absolutely a part of that. And that is a story of the season, which is why I think when you talk about like what the award is, like if we want to talk about the best quarterback and who you take first in a draft, that's a different conversation than who's the MVP of the NFL right now.
It's like the Patrick Mahomes, by the way.
Right. The Niners offense, the Niners as a whole are the best team in the league, and the quarterback is putting up historic numbers, and he might set the all-time record for yards per attempt, and whether or not you think Brock Purdy deserves 100% of the credit or 2% of the credit for that, like that's, in my opinion, what would be recognized if he did win the MVP is just like what this offense is doing.
Yep.
Because you can't like, or give Kyle Shanahan Coach of the Year, which he's probably not going to get either.
Right. He's definitely
right.
Not. Like no chance. No chance
So
of getting that. Too talented. Team's too good.
And maybe it's just the Niners win the Super Bowl, and that's the recognition that's like ultimately that what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but if the Niners don't win the Super Bowl and we look back at this regular season, they finish the number 1 seed, and it's like somebody else wins MVP, it's gonna be like, okay, like I don't know, man.
I actually, in our YouTube chat, youtube.com/@Candlestick Chronicles podcast, or just search Candlestick Chronicles on YouTube or right there. Please subscribe and like the video. In our YouTube chat said, personally, I think there's a greater argument for CMC to win MVP. I actually really disagree. Like realistically, like to sit down and go, okay, who are they going to vote for? I would agree that Christian McCaffrey is probably the 49ers MVP. But realistically, okay, let's go to a voter. A voter's not going to go, wow, look at the way he warps a defense when he swings out in motion. Wow, look at the way he doesn't create a ton of his own yards in the run game. He's really good at executing the Niners run game. For a non-QB to win it, you have to have a massive outlier statistical season. And that's why I think Tyreek Hill should win it. He's going to have 2,000 yards and 22 touchdowns or whatever ridiculous number he's on pace for. Like that's why I think Tyreek Hill. For Christian McCaffrey to get there, like 2,000-ish scrimmage yards and 20-ish touchdowns isn't gonna get him MVP votes. That's just
okay. So I have a question. Say Dak Prescott wins MVP, which it seems like he's the favorite over Brock Purdy right now, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Say the Niners beat the Cowboys in the second round of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
How do we remember the MVP? Are we going to be like, man, Dak Prescott totally dominated the league, MVP, unequivocal, when he has 2 losses to the 49ers, including one in the playoffs?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's gonna be one of the more forgettable MVP discussions, right? It's gonna be like, well, he won it, but like we're all just in 5 years just kind of shrug our shoulders, be like, okay.
It really MVP. Here's where and this is kind of where I want to end this, because we could legit, you and I could talk about this for 3 hours, but the thing for me is like all of this is going to come down to the next 4 games left. All of it's going to come down to the next 4 games. That's if Dak Prescott has a dog shit game this week and the Cowboys lose and Brock Purdy has a really good game and the Niners win, he is going to be the runaway favorite. And if the Niners win out and Brock Purdy is really good and just kind of paces the way he's pacing, and the Cowboys lose too, but Dak plays really well, but hey, you know what? The Cowboys are the 5th seed. It's going to be Brock. That's what this is all going to come down to.
Yeah. And again, like I want it to be clear, I don't necessarily think Brock Purdy is the MVP. I think he has a better case than Dak Prescott personally, given the wins that the 49ers have had and given how he's played in those wins.
Yeah.
But like I'm with you in that I think Tyreek Hill is probably the MVP of the league.
I'm glad we're simpatico on this, because I'd hate to have to like argue with you on it.
No, I mean, but again, like the fact that it's Tyreek Hill, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy seemingly as the 3 most viable candidates speaks to how down most of the biggest stars in the league are.
Yeah.
Right. Joe Burrow's hurt. Aaron Rodgers is hurt. Like there's just so many quarterbacks throughout the NFL that you would consider in that discussion that just aren't there or having bad years or years that we're not used to seeing them have, like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
Yeah. Weird season for sure. All right. I can't wait to continue this discussion, because legitimately it's just going to change every single week. If Purdy this weekend throws for 350 and 3 touchdowns and Dak throws for $180, 2 touchdowns and a pick, they're going to be like, I don't know how you don't vote for Purdy. Or if Tyreek Hill goes and has 300 yards, like Tyreek's the MVP.
Given how the Bills have been playing lately, if Dallas goes in to Buffalo and wins that game, and Dak balls out, like
Mhm.
I'll feel better about giving Dak that award. But
Sure.
like before the Eagles game, and honestly, like, you know, Aaron Schatz talks about the Eagles being the 8th team according to
Mhm.
DVOA. The Eagles defense has been terrible. You can make a case that Dak still hasn't done it against like a good defense in a big moment yet.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like his blow up came against a bunch of just terrible teams.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
he
that's
played
true.
really well against the Eagles. And so, you know, I just want to see I just want to see more from Dak if he's the league MVP.
Here's the last thing I have on this. For real, for real. Kenny in our YouTube chat said Lamar Jackson's number 3 on the list and odds. That's the other wrinkle here. If the Niners are cruising along and Lamar Jackson goes into Levi Stadium and rushes for 2 touchdowns and throws for 2 and the Ravens beat the Niners by 14 points, Lamar Jackson's suddenly your MVP.
Yeah, I mean, he has 16 touchdown passes. Purdy has 9 more than him.
Yeah, but
yeah, he's averaging 7.8 yards per attempt. And I know I'm not discounting anything Lamar's doing, but just from a numbers standpoint,
what are his
it's a tough
rushing
case.
numbers, though?
It's a tough case to make.
What are his rushing numbers, and who's his best receiver? All right, I'm gonna go. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not done that. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Schatz is next, unless you're watching live.
If you're watching live,
he's not
the YouTube video is up and posted. You could watch that on YouTube. We're gonna throw the audio into this one on the podcast feed.
Yes.
Lamar Jackson, 123 carries, 644 yards. He has 5 touchdowns. So if you add his passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns, it's still fewer than Brock Purdy.
Oof. But hey, it's all narratives.
Total. Not saying he's not a candidate, but
if he goes in and beats Brock Purdy, watch out.
Yeah.
Just saying. All right. Goodbye, everybody.